The world is not yet a world. It is a fever, a jagged stone suspended in the velvet throat of an infant solar system. Before the first bone was ever knit, before the first lung drew breath, there was only the cooling of the great fire. You are standing on the shore of a sea that does not yet know the colour blue. Under a sky the shade of bruised plum and thick with the suffocating weight of carbon, the horizon is a jagged line of cooling basalt, glowing a dull, rhythmic red. The silence here is not the silence of a forest or a desert. It is the absolute silence of a vacuum being filled. There is no wind to rustle leaves, for there are no leaves. There is no tide to lap against the shore, for the moon is still a chaotic, jagged fragment torn from the Earth's side, hanging so close in the sky that it looms like a celestial intruder. It pulls at the molten mantle of the planet, dragging the very rock upward in great, sluggish swells of heat. You can feel the vibration of this cosmic friction deep within your marrow, a low-frequency hum that predates the concept of sound. Beneath your feet, the crust is thin, a fragile membrane stretched over a heart of churning iron. Great fissures open with the sound of grinding glass, venting the internal pressures of a world trying to find its shape. From these wounds, steam rises vast, towering pillars of water vapor that have traveled from the planet's metallic core to meet the freezing touch of the void. This is the Great Condensation. For millions of years, the atmosphere has been a saturated sponge holding the sweat of a cooling world. Now the temperature tips. The first raindrop falls, it does not fall alone. It is joined by 1 trillion others, a deluge that will last for centuries. This is the baptism of the Hadean. The rain is acidic, biting into the volcanic glass, dissolving the minerals and carving the first paths toward the lowlands. You watch as the water gathers in the hollows of the world, creating the first pools, the first lakes, and eventually the first global sea. This water is green, saturated with iron and nickel, a heavy liquid that mirrors the violent sky. In this era, time is not measured by the flickering of a heartbeat or the passing of a season. It is measured by the cooling of a planet's crust by a single degree every 100,000 years. It is a pace so slow, it mimics stasis, yet beneath the surface of the green water, the chemistry of the universe is beginning to fold in upon itself. The heat of the Earth's core meets the cold of the newly formed oceans, creating a thermal gradient, a battery of pure potential. As you drift through this primordial haze, the crushing atmospheric pressure begins to feel like a heavy blanket, pinning you to the cooling stone. The darkness is total, save for the occasional lightning strike that illuminates the steam-choked horizon in a strobe light flicker of violet. In those brief moments of clarity, you see a world of absolute purity as slate, wiped clean of all history, waiting for the first signature of life. You are a ghost in the machine of deep time, a witness to the moment the Earth ceased to be a star and began its long, slow journey toward becoming a home. The heat is fading. The water is settling. The great silence has begun. The Earth you inhabit in this distant epoch is a stranger to the one you know. It is a world of frantic, violent motion, spinning with a prehistoric ferocity that would leave a modern observer breathless. A single day, the full transit of the sun across the violet sky, lasts a mere 6 hours. The sun does not drift, it races, a pale dim disk cutting through the chemical haze of the atmosphere with a speed that defies the stillness of the stone beneath your feet. You are standing on a planet that is vibrating with the kinetic energy of its own violent birth, atop spun by the hand of a chaotic solar system. This rapid rotation creates a world of atmospheric fury. The winds here are not gentle breezes but sustained, planetary scale gales driven by the sheer velocity of the Earth's turn. They howl through the basalt canyons with a low, mournful frequency, carrying the grit of volcanic ash and the sharp scent of ionized sulfur. The air itself feels thick, a pressurized fluid that pushes against you with the weight of an invisible ocean. Every movement requires intent. Every breath is a negotiation with the crushing density of a young world. But the true master of this era hangs above you, terrifyingly close. The moon, a jagged and scarred remnant of the great collision that birthed it, looms in the sky like a celestial predator. It is nearly 20 times closer than it will be in the human era, filling the horizon with its cratered, lifeless face. You can see the individual mountains of the lunar surface without the aid of a lens, their shadows stretching across the moonscape in the harsh light of the young sun. It does not hang peacefully. It dominates the sky, a silver titan that exerts a physical pull you can feel in the very fluid of your inner ear. This proximity creates tides of a scale that borders on the geological. The young oceans do not merely rise and fall, they surge in massive kilometre-high walls of water that roar across the cooling crust. The gravity of the moon reaches deep into the Earth's mantle, pulling at the liquid rock beneath the surface, causing the ground to heave and buckle in a rhythmic, agonizing dance. The crust itself rises and falls by several meters twice a day, a phenomenon known as terrestrial tides. The very stone beneath your feet is elastic, stretched and compressed by the lunar ghost that haunts the orbit. As you stand on the edge of a jagged peninsula, the sound is a deafening, rhythmic thrum, the heartbeat of a planet in tectonic labor. The friction of these massive tides generates a tremendous internal heat, slowing the Earth's rotation by fractions of a second every century. It is a cosmic exchange of energy. The Earth sheds its speed to push the moon further away, a slow-motion divorce that will take billions of years to finalize. But here, in the deep time of the Hadean, they are locked in a violent, intimate embrace. The weight of this gravity is a reminder of the raw physical laws that sculpted the theatre of life. There is no biology here to soften the edges of the world, only the cold mathematics of mass and distance. You feel the insignificance of a singular consciousness against the backdrop of such orbital mechanics. The planet is a massive spinning engine of heat and stone, indifferent to the passage of time, grinding toward a future it cannot foresee. The moon begins its rapid descent toward the horizon, its gravitational grip easing for a brief, fleeting moment, leaving you in the heavy, pressurized silence of the darkening plains. The sky of the early Earth is an alien tapestry of deep ochre and toxic green, a thick shroud that suffocates the young sun. But beneath the churning surface of the global ocean, a different kind of alchemy is taking place. You are descending now, leaving the gale-force winds of the surface for the heavy, pressurized silence of the primordial deep. Here, the water is not the transparent blue of a modern tropical reef. It is a dense metallic soup, saturated with dissolved iron, magnesium, and silica. It is a world of liquid rust, where the chemistry of the planet is being written in the language of metal. As you drift downward, the light from above fades rapidly, filtered through the suspended minerals until it becomes a dim, bruised purple. There is no biological debris here, no marine snow of falling plankton or decaying scales. Instead, there is the iron rain. In the cooling waters, the iron that has been vomited from the Earth's interior begins to react with the traces of oxygen and sulfur, precipitating out of the water column in fine, microscopic flakes. It falls like a silent red dust, coating the jagged volcanic floor in a velvet layer of hematite and magnetite. This is the era of the Great Deposition. You watch as the seabed becomes a ledger of the planet's internal pulse. Every pulse of volcanic activity, every shift in the cooling crust, sends a new wave of minerals into the water, layering the floor in alternating bands of red and grey. These are the banded iron formations, the silent archives of a world before life. You're witnessing the birth of the ore that, billions of years in the future, will be forged into the steel of human cities. But here, it is merely the heavy sediment of a world trying to reach chemical equilibrium. The pressure at these depths is a physical presence, a cold, unyielding hand that presses against the silence. The water is remarkably still, yet it is chemically volatile. Without the presence of free oxygen to stabilize the environment, the ocean is a reactive cauldron. In the distance, the faint, ghostly glow of a subaquatic fissure illuminates the rain. The flakes of iron catch the bioluminescent-like shimmer of the heat, looking like embers falling through a dark, liquid sky. It is a beautiful, terrifying, sterile landscape gallery of inorganic art, where the only sculptor is the laws of thermodynamics. You rest upon a ledge of obsidian, watching the red dust settle into the crevices of the stone. There is a profound sense of waiting in this darkness. The iron rain is the planet's way of breathing, a slow exhalation of the heavy elements that once churned in its molten heart. It is a process that takes no account of the hours. A single layer of this metallic silt may represent 1,000 years of absolute uninterrupted quiet. You are an intruder in a cathedral of mineralogy, a witness to the fundamental building blocks of a terrestrial home. The vastness of this metallic sea is a meditation on the persistence of matter. Every atom of iron falling around you has its origins in the hearts of dying stars, gathered by gravity to form this singular, spinning rock. As the rain continues its eternal silent descent, the floor of the ocean grows thick and heavy, a massive weight that will eventually bow the crust and trigger the first true movements of the tectonic plates. The cycle of the Earth is beginning to turn, driven by the weight of the red dust and the cold, unblinking eye of the deep time abyss. Deep within the crushing weight of the iron-stained sea, the world is not entirely cold. You are drifting toward a jagged scar in the Earth's crust, a place where the barrier between the cooling exterior and the molten heart is dangerously thin. Here, the lost city rises a forest of towering, ghostly white chimneys composed of carbonate and silica, exhaling shimmering plumes of alkaline fluid into the dark. These are not the violent black smokers of a later era, but gentle, persistent vents, whispering the secrets of the interior into the vast, unlistening deep. The water here is a turbulent tapestry of temperature and chemistry. As the warm, mineral-rich fluids meet the frigid seawater, they create a shimmering haze, a liquid aurora that dances in the absolute darkness. There is no sunlight here. The energy is purely chemical, a potent battery powered by the serpentinization of the rocks below. You can feel the vibration of the water below, rhythmic thrumming as the earth breathes through these stone lungs. It is a sensory landscape of heat and pressure, where the very molecules are being torn apart and reassembled in the chaotic friction of the vent's mouth. In the microscopic pores of these towers, a silent revolution is unfolding. The chimneys are not solid stone. They are a honeycomb of tiny interconnected chambers, each acting as a natural laboratory. Within these labyrinths, the iron and sulfur from the rain above meet the hydrogen and carbon dioxide from the vent's breath. In the stillness of these mineral cells, the first organic strings, the precursors to lipids and amino acids, begin to spontaneously weave themselves together. It is a slow, agonizingly delicate process, driven by the thermal gradient of the vent, a cosmic coincidence of heat and geometry. The atmosphere within these stone hives is one of intense focus. You are witnessing the transition from geology to biology, a moment so profound it dwarfs the scale of the mountains above. There is no spark of life here, only the relentless mathematical folding of carbon chains, 1,000 failures for every successful bond. The vastness of time is the only catalyst. For 1,000,000 years, the vents have whispered, and for 1,000,000 years, the chemistry has churned, until the first membranes begin to form, fragile, oily bubbles that trap the energy of the Earth within a tiny, private universe. This is the true cradle of the world. Far beneath the howling winds and the racing moon, the stillness of the hydrothermal field provides the stability required for complexity to take root. You watch as the shimmering fluids rise like ghosts against the dark basalt, carrying the heat of the core away into the infinite heatsink of the ocean. The insignificance of a singular moment is laid bare. Life is not an event, but a planetary-scale persistence, a slow accumulation of chemical intent that has been practicing its craft in the dark for eons. As you linger near the warmth of a towering white spire, the scale of the silence becomes overwhelming. The Earth is a massive inorganic machine, yet in these hidden, whispering corners, it is beginning to dream. The vents flicker with the pale internal glow of crystallization, a slow-motion firework display that no eye will see for another 1,000,000,000 years. The pressure is a comfort here, a stabilizing force that holds the fragile precursors of life together against the entropic pull of the void. The whispers continue, a low tectonic lullaby that marks the true beginning of the deep time narrative. The era of the vents was a time of hidden miracles, but the true transformation of the planet required a move toward the light. You are ascending now, rising through the iron-rich bloom of the Archean Ocean toward the sun-drenched shallows of the continental shelves. Here, the water is a vibrant alien turquoise, and the rhythmic surge of the tides creates a restless, foaming boundary between the liquid and the stone. On the sunlit floor of these ancient bays, the first great monuments of life are being built, the stromatolites. These are not creatures of bone or limb, but living tapestries of cyanobacteria, woven together into domes and pillows of laminated stone. They look like rounded, greyish boulders, silent and immovable, yet they are the most powerful engines of change the Earth has ever known. Each layer is a microscopic metropolis, a thin film of green-blue cells that have mastered the ultimate alchemy, photosynthesis. You watch as the sunlight pierces the shallow water, striking the surface of these mats, and triggering a chemical chain reaction that will rewrite the destiny of the world. As the cyanobacteria consume the carbon dioxide that has choked the atmosphere for eons, they release a byproduct that is, at this moment in time, a lethal poison, oxygen. You can see it happening in the slow, meditative stillness of the bay. Tiny, silver bubbles, the first breath of the planet, begin to form on the surface of the green mats. They cling to the bacterial filaments like liquid pearls before breaking free and drifting upward, shimmering in the golden light as they rise toward the surface. Each bubble is a microscopic grenade, a fragment of reactive gas that will eventually dismantle the methane-heavy sky. But the Earth is not ready to breathe just yet. For millions of years, the oxygen released by the stromatolites does not reach the atmosphere. Instead, it is immediately seized by the dissolved iron in the water. You witness the Great Rusting, a planetary-scale chemical battle where the oxygen binds with the iron to form a red silt that snows down upon the seabed. It is only when the oceans have been bled dry of their minerals, when the iron has been exhausted, that the oxygen is finally allowed to escape the water's surface and bleed into the air. This transition is a slow-motion catastrophe for the older, anaerobic life of the vents. To them, oxygen is a corrosive fire, a gas that tears through delicate membranes and shatters the chemistry of the old world. You feel the weight of this silent biological warfare. Life is no longer just surviving the environment, it is actively destroying and rebuilding it. The sky, once a murky violet, begins to clear, turning a pale, unfamiliar blue as the methane is oxidized. The very temperature of the planet begins to shift as the greenhouse blanket is stripped away, thin layer by thin layer. The stromatolites continue their work, indifferent to the global upheaval they have triggered. They are the guardians of the new world, a silent green army that has learned to harness the power of a star. As you drift among these stony domes, the scale of their persistence becomes haunting. A single stromatolite may take a century to grow a single millimeter, yet together they are turning a toxic rock into a breathing organism. The atmosphere is filling with the potential for complex thought, for flight, and for fire. The first breath has been taken, and the Earth will never be silent in the same way again. The oxygen revolution, for all its creative potential, has brought the world to the precipice of total stillness. By stripping the atmosphere of its methane shroud, the cyanobacteria have inadvertently extinguished the planet's internal hearth. You are witnessing the onset of the Huronian glaciation, a deep planetary winter that will last for 300 million years. The vibrant turquoise shallows are gone, replaced by a creeping, relentless white. The ice does not merely crown the poles, it marches toward the equator, a crystalline sheet of armor that seals the ocean away from the sky. The sensory landscape is one of terrifying purity. The howling gales of the Hadean have been replaced by a thin, brittle wind that carries no scent and no moisture. The sun, though bright in a now clear blue sky, provides no warmth. Its rays simply bounce off the blinding white surface and back into the void. The Earth has become a mirror, a snowball suspended in the dark. Beneath the ice, which has grown to a thickness of over a kilometer, the pressure is immense. The global ocean is now a dark subglacial tomb, cut off from the energy of the sun and the rhythm of the tides. In this lightless abyss, the great silence is almost absolute. The stromatolites that once bathed in the golden shallows are now dormant or dead, their stone monuments crushed under the weight of the encroaching glaciers. But life is a stubborn ember. You drift toward the deep oceanic trenches and the hidden hydrothermal fields you visited eons ago. Here, in the warmth of the volcanic vents, the remnants of the biosphere huddle in the dark. It is a world of microscopic refugees, surviving on the chemical scraps of the Earth's interior, while the surface world remains frozen in a crystalline stasis. The philosophy of this era is one of extreme patience. For millions of generations, life does not evolve, it merely persists. The vastness of the ice creates a temporal vacuum where time seems to lose its meaning. You feel the weight of these lost millions of years, the sheer statistical improbability of survival in a world where the thermometer never rises above freezing. The Earth is a closed system, a pressurized vessel of cold and dark, where the only movement is the slow tectonic grinding of the plates beneath the ice, a reminder that the heart of the planet is still beating, however faintly. The end of the silence comes not from above, but from below. You watch as the carbon dioxide from volcanic eruptions, trapped for eons beneath the ice, begins to build up in the atmosphere. Because there is no liquid water to wash the gas from the air, the greenhouse effect begins to mount with a desperate intensity. Tipping point is a sensory explosion. The ice does not melt, it shatters. In a geological blink of an eye, the white mirror is destroyed, replaced by a world of roaring meltwater and violent, chaotic storms. The great silence is broken by the sound of 1,000 collapsing glaciers. As the sunlight finally touches the water again, the oceans are hyperoxygenated and rich in the nutrients ground up by the passing ice. The stage is set for a burst of complexity that the world has never seen. The refugees of the vents emerge into a new light, carrying with them the scars of the deep cold and the genetic blueprints for everything that is to come. The snowball was not a dead end, but a forge, a period of intense evolutionary pressure that tempered the very fabric of life. The planet is awake again, and the garden of the Ediacaran is about to bloom. The roar of the melting glaciers has faded into a rhythmic ancestral pulse. You are drifting through the shallow seas of the Ediacaran, a world that feels like a fever dream of biology. The water is clear, filtered by the settling of post-glacial silt, and the light of the sun reaches down to stroke the seabed with golden fingers. But there are no fish here. There are no shells, no bones, and no teeth. This is the Garden of Ediacara, a brief, fragile window in time where life experimented with forms that defy modern classification, creatures of soft tissue and quilted symmetry. Below you, the seafloor is carpeted in a strange living tapestry. You see Charniodiscus, a creature that looks like a translucent fern frond, its base anchored into the sediment by a bulbous holdfast. It does not move. It sways in the gentle current, absorbing nutrients directly from the water through its delicate quilted skin. It is a creature of fractal beauty, repeating its branching patterns with a mathematical precision that feels more like crystalline growth than animal life. There is no mouth, no gut, and no evidence of struggle. Nearby, a flat oval disc known as Dickinsonia lies pressed against the microbial mat. It is ribbed like a silken fan, a segmented ghost that can grow to the size of a dinner plate. It does not swim. It glides with an imperceptible slowness, creeping across the seabed to digest the bacterial slime beneath its body. There is an eerie peace to this ecosystem. In the absence of predators, there is no need for armor, no need for speed, and no need for the frantic vigilance that will define the eras to come. It is a world of stationary elegance, a garden, where life exists in a state of horizontal meditation. The atmosphere of the Ediacaran is one of profound vulnerability. The creatures here are soft, their bodies held together by the gentle pressure of the water and the structural integrity of collagen. You are witnessing a failed experiment in body plans forms that are neither plant nor truly animal in the way we understand them today. They are the Vendobians, a lost kingdom of life that explored the possibilities of two-dimensional existence. To touch one would be to feel something like wet velvet or heavy smoke. They are the ghosts of a biological part not taken. As you drift further, you notice the first signs of a changing world. Small winding trails are etched into the microbial mats, the tracks of Kimberella, a mollusk-like pioneer that has developed the ability to move with purpose. It possesses a primitive snout and perhaps the very first hint of a shell. This is the beginning of the end for the garden. The introduction of intent. The ability to seek out food rather than waiting for the water to provide it is the first crack in the Ediacaran piece. The silence is still heavy, but it is no longer the silence of stasis. It is the silence of a fuse burning down. The philosophy of the Ediacaran is a reminder of the infinite creativity of the deep time abyss. For tens of millions of years, these fronds and discs were the masters of the earth, a testament to the fact that complexity does not always require conflict. But the shadows are lengthening. Beneath the soft, quilted skin of the garden, the blueprints for muscles, nerves, and jaws are being drafted in the dark. You linger over a field of swaying Charniodiscus, watching them catch the fading light, knowing that the explosion of the Cambrian is only a heartbeat away, and these elegant ghosts will soon vanish into the dust of the ancient deep. The stillness of the Ediacaran garden is beginning to ripple. For eons, life was a stationary affair, a passive recipient of the ocean's grace. But now, a fundamental shift is occurring. A mechanical awakening that will redefine the relationship between a creature and its environment. You are witnessing the birth of the muscle. Beneath the translucent, quilted surfaces of the seabed's inhabitants, protein fibers are learning to shorten and pull. This is the spark of motion, the moment the world ceased to be a gallery of living statues and became a theatre of action. This transition is not merely biological, it is philosophical. To move is to possess a self that is distinct from the surroundings. You drift closer to the sediment, observing a carrier wariotia, a tiny bilateral organism no larger than a grain of rice. It is humble, almost invisible, yet it represents a monumental leap in complexity. It possesses a front and a back, a left and a right. This symmetry allows for a directed journey. For the first time, an animal is not just existing in a place. It is traveling through it, leaving behind the first purposeful burrows in the microbial mat. The sensory experience of this era is defined by the rhythm of contraction. You can almost feel the microscopic tug of actin and myosin filaments, the same cellular machinery that will one day power the beat of a human heart or the flight of a bird. In the velvet darkness of the seafloor, these contractions allow for a new kind of interaction, the ability to burrow, to hide, and to seek. The environment is no longer just a backdrop, it is an obstacle to be navigated, or a resource to be exploited. The intent of the organism is etched into the mud in the form of winding, rhythmic trails. This newfound mobility triggers an evolutionary arms race that will eventually shatter the peace of the deep. To move requires energy, and to gain energy, one must find more efficient ways to consume. You see the first evidence of a gutter tube that runs the length of the body, allowing for the continuous processing of food. This is the inner sea, a private reservoir of chemistry that frees the animal from total dependence on the external water. The spark of motion has created the need for a fuel, and that fuel will soon be found in the bodies of other living things. As you hover in the darkening water, the significance of this change settles over you like the heavy pressure of the deep. Motion brought about the need for coordination, which in turn birthed the first clusters of nerve cells, the ancestors of the brain. The world is beginning to feel. A touch at one end of a creature now triggers a reaction at the other. The universe is no longer a silent witness. It is becoming a sensory experience for the organisms within it. The first flicker of consciousness is emerging, tied inextricably to the ability to crawl across the ancient silt. The vastness of time has allowed for this slow-motion ignition. What began as a chemical whisper in a hydrothermal vent has now become a mechanical force capable of carving paths through the earth. The garden is fading, not because of a cataclysm of ice or fire, but because its inhabitants have learned to walk away from their anchors. The spark has been struck, and the slow meditative crawl of the Ediacaran is about to accelerate into the frantic predatory dance of the Cambrian explosion. The long, slow twilight of the Ediacaran has vanished, replaced by a world that has suddenly, violently ignited. You are standing on the threshold of the Cambrian, an era where the pace of life shifts from the geological to the biological. The water, once a sanctuary of soft forms, is now a crowded arena of competition. This is the ignition period, where the blueprints of every major animal group on Earth are drafted in a frantic burst of evolutionary creativity. But the most profound change is not one of limb or lung, it is the sudden, terrifying appearance of the eye. For the first time in the history of the universe, the world is being watched. You drift through a sea where light is no longer just a source of energy for the bacterial mats. It is information. Primitive, compound eyes, flickering with thousands of hexagonal lenses, are tracking the movement of shadows. To see is to possess a godlike advantage, a sensory bridge that spans the distance between predator and prey. The silence of the deep is now charged with the tension of being seen. You can feel the weight of 1,000 invisible gazes as the first arthropods and chordates navigate the sun-dappled reefs. This visual revolution triggers the birth of the predator. You witness the arrival of creatures built for the hunt, organized, armored, and fast. The soft, quilted bodies of the past are gone, replaced by the mechanical rigidity of the exoskeleton. Life has discovered the outer shell, a protective barrier made of calcium carbonate and chitin. The seafloor is no longer a garden, it is a landscape of defense. Everywhere you look, there are spines, shields, and burrowing tubes. The arms race has begun, and the price of entry is the ability to kill or the capacity to hide. The sensory landscape is now one of frantic motion. You see Opabenia, a creature so surreal it seems to belong to another world, with its 5 stalks of eyes and a flexible, vacuum-like nozzle for a mouth. It is a testament to the experimental chaos of the Cambrian, a time when nature was trying every possible configuration of flesh and bone. The water is heavy, with the vibrations of scuttling legs, and the rhythmic pulsing of primitive fins. The intent you saw in the Ediacaran has sharpened into a lethal precision. The philosophy of the Cambrian is one of brutal beauty. It is the moment when the self becomes a fortress. The appearance of the eye created the other, the target, the threat, the meal. You are witnessing the birth of the modern world's ecology, where survival is a matter of milliseconds and millimeters. The vastness of time has contracted into the immediate present. As the sun sets over the Cambrian Sea, the violet sky reflects off the first true shells, shimmering like jewels in the surf. The ignition has changed the rules of existence. Life is no longer a passive passenger on a cooling rock, it is an active participant in its own destiny. The pressure of the deep is now matched by the pressure of competition. As you hover in the shadows of a towering coral-like sponge, a shape drifts above you, a shadow larger than any you have seen before. It is the first apex predator of the planet, a titan of the ancient deep that marks the beginning of the age of monsters. The Cambrian Sea, once a landscape of scuttling miniatures, now falls into a sudden rhythmic hush. Above the jagged trilobite trails and the swaying sponges, a shadow begins to stretch, a dark, undulating silhouette that blots out the flickering sun. This is Anomalocaris, the abnormal shrimp, a creature that represents the first time life achieved the scale of a titan. It is nearly a meter in length, a giant in a world of pebbles, and its presence marks the birth of the apex predator. You are watching the first true king of the world, glide through the water with a terrifying liquid grace. Its body is a masterpiece of prehistoric engineering, a series of overlapping flexible flaps that ripple like a silk ribbon. This allows it to move with a silent, ghostly efficiency, hovering over the seabed like a modern bird of prey. But it is the head that commands your attention. Two massive, bulbous compound eyes on thick stalks swivel independently, scanning the sediment with a precision that no other creature can match. With over 16,000 hexagonal lenses, its vision is a mosaic of movement, capable of detecting the slightest twitch of a trilobite's antenna from meters away. Beneath these watchful eyes are the great appendages, two spiked, segmented arms that curl like the tail of a scorpion. You watch as they lash out with lightning speed, pinning a fleeing arthropod against the silt. The movement is fluid, calculated, and devastating. These arms bring the prey toward a mouth that looks like nothing else in the history of life, a circular, radial disc of overlapping plates that resemble a pineapple ring. It does not bite like a jaw, it crushes like a hydraulic press. The sound, if you could hear it, would be the sharp staccato crack of chitinous shells being splintered into dust. The sensory experience of the Anomalocaris shadow is one of absolute dominance. To be in its presence is to understand the true meaning of the hunter and the hunted. It is the first creature to look down upon the world. Its perspective shifted from the two-dimensional crawl of the seabed to the three-dimensional freedom of the water column. You feel the weight of this biological transition. The verticality of the ocean has been conquered. The first shadow has turned the entire sea into a hunting ground, forcing every other living thing to adapt, to harden, or to vanish. The philosophy of Anomalocaris is the philosophy of Anomalocaris is the philosophy of the pioneer. It is the prototype for every shark, every orca, and every eagle that will follow. It represents the moment the Earth's ecosystem gained its final, necessary component, the regulator at the top of the food chain. Its existence ensures that only the swiftest and the best armored will survive to pass on their blueprints. The deep time abyss is no longer a place of random growth. It is a structured hierarchy, a pyramid of energy where Anomalocaris sits, unblinking and supreme, at the very peak. As the great predator drifts away, its flaps undulating in a slow-motion dance, the trilobites below begin to emerge from their burrows once more. But the world has changed. The memory of the shadow remains etched into the genetic code of the survivors. The era of the soft and the slow is over. You watch the first shadow disappear into the bruised purple of the distant deep, leaving behind a sea that is now defined by the tension of the chase. The Cambrian ignition has reached its full predatory heat. As the shadow of Anomalocaris passes, the residents of the seabed reveal the brilliance of their counter-strategy. The Cambrian is not just an age of hunters. It is the golden age of the engineer. You are looking closely at the trilobite, a creature that has turned its own skin into a fortress of crystalline precision. These are the arthropods, the jointed feet, and their arrival marks the moment life discovered the mechanical power of the exoskeleton. Their shells are not mere coverings, they're complex suits of armor, forged from a combination of organic chitin and the mineral hardness of calcite. The sensory detail of a trilobite shell is a study in geometric perfection. You run a ghostly hand over the three-lobed carapace of an Elrathia, feeling the smooth, cold ripples of its segments. Each segment is a masterpiece of articulation, allowing the creature to move with a rhythmic, undulating flexibility, or to roll itself into a tight, impenetrable ball of stone when danger nears. This volvation is a defensive miracle, a soft-bellied organism transforming itself into a featureless pebble in a matter of seconds. The predator is met not with flesh, but with a wall of mineralized shield. But the true genius of the trilobite lies in its eyes, the first high-resolution optical systems in history. Unlike the soft lenses of later mammals, these eyes are made of solid crystal. Each individual lens is a tiny, precisely oriented prism of transparent calcite. You are witnessing a creature that literally sees the world through stone. These lenses are designed to correct for the distortion of water, providing a sharp panoramic view of the ancient deep. They are the oldest eyes in the fossil record, and their structural integrity is so great that they remain clear even after 500 million years of burial in the earth. Of the arthropod is one of modularity and resilience. By placing their skeletons on the outside, they have created a body plan that can be infinitely tweaked. Some develop long, sweeping defensive spines to make themselves impossible to swallow. Others grow shovels for snouts to disappear into the silt. You see the great experiment of the exoskeleton unfolding in real time, 1,000 variations of legs, antennae, and gills, all protected by the same fundamental chemistry of the shell. This is the birth of the most successful animal phylum to ever walk, swim, or fly upon the earth. The pressure of the deep is no longer an enemy to these creatures, it is a structural ally. Their rigid carapaces are built to withstand the crushing weight of the Paleozoic oceans, providing a stable internal environment for their delicate gills and copper-based blood. As you watch a colony of trilobites scuttle across a reef of ancient sponges, you hear the faint, rhythmic clicking of their legs against the stone, the sound of a world that has finally found its footing. They are the clockwork of the Cambrian, moving with a mechanical certainty that suggests they will endure forever. The vastness of time has seen many empires rise and fall, but the empire of the arthropod is one of the most enduring. They have taken the chaotic energy of the ignition and channeled it into a design that is both elegant and utilitarian. You linger over a single, perfectly preserved shell, noting the fine sensory pits that allow the creature to taste the vibrations of the water. Even in the silence of the ancient deep, there is a profound sense of industry. The armor of the arthropod is the first great shield against the void, a testament to life's ability to harden itself against the demands of a violent universe. The world is cooling. The frantic, colourful heat of the Cambrian has transitioned into the Ordovician, a time of deepening oceans and a planet-wide shift toward the shadows. You are descending away from the sun-drenched reefs into the great blue-black silence of the abyss. The water here is colder, the pressure a heavy, comforting weight that stills the spirit. In this deepening gloom, the scuttling trilobites have been replaced by the masters of the vertical world, the cephalopods. These are the ancestors of the squid and the octopus, but they carry their history on their backs in the form of massive straight shells. The sensory landscape of the Ordovician deep is one of immense drifting shadows. You are watching a Camaraoceras, a titan of the lightless zones. Its shell is a tapering, porcelain-white cone that stretches nearly 6 meters into the darkness, cutting through the water like a spear. It does not swim with the frantic flapping of a fish. It moves through jet propulsion, a rhythmic, pulsing exhalation of water that drives it backward with a ghostly, effortless momentum. It is a creature of geometry and grace, its heavy shell balanced by a sophisticated internal buoyancy system of gas-filled chambers. As you drift alongside this ancient traveler, you see its face, a cluster of powerful, muscular tentacles emerging from the base of the cone. They move with an independent, searching intelligence, feeling for the vibrations of prey in the lightless water. In the center of this ring of flesh is a parrot-like beak of black chitin, capable of snapping through the toughest trilobite armor. But it is the eyes that haunt you. They are large, dark, and remarkably complex, peering through the gloom with a calm, predatory focus. This is the first time a truly high-level intelligence has inhabited the deep, a mind capable of strategy and spatial memory. The philosophy of the Ordovician abyss is one of patience and pressure. Here, in the vast volume of the open ocean, life has escaped the two-dimensional constraints of the seabed. The cephalopods have mastered the art of drifting, of existing in a state of neutral buoyancy, where they are neither rising nor falling, but simply becoming one with the current. You feel the insignificance of the individual against this backdrop of endless blue. The Camarasaurus is a speck of intent in 1,000 miles of indifference. It is a world where time is measured by the slow, rhythmic opening and closing of a siphon. The deepening of the oceans has created new niches for life to explore. Beneath the drifting giants, the first true monsters of the deep are evolving, creatures that have traded the armor of the shell for the speed of the fin. But for now, the straight-shelled nautiloids are the undisputed sovereigns. They are the guardians of the deep time archive, their chambered shells recording the chemical signature of the oceans as they grow. You watch as a group of small orthocones maneuvers with the precision of a silent fleet, their shells catching the last dying glimmers of the surface light. As the sun sets above the surface, the Ordovician abyss remains unchanged. The darkness is a constant, a sanctuary for the creatures of the cone. The pressure has become a fundamental part of their being, a structural necessity that holds their complex bodies together. You linger in the wake of the Camarasaurus, watching it disappear into the absolute black of the midnight zone. The world has found its depth. The garden is a distant memory, and the explosion has settled into a sophisticated, predatory equilibrium. The age of the giants has truly begun. The Ordovician deep is a realm of crushing stillness, a place where the weight of the water above creates a cathedral of absolute silence. In this lightless theatre, the Camarasaurus does not merely exist, it haunts. You're observing the ultimate expression of the cephalopod's ancient lineage, a creature that has maximized the potential of the shell to become the largest predator the world has yet seen. Its 6-meter conical home is a masterpiece of biological architecture, a long, straight spire of calcium carbonate that tapers to a fine point, cutting through the water like a silent porcelain spear. The mechanics of this titan are a wonder of buoyancy and physics. Within the long cone, the creature lives only in the final, largest chamber. The hundreds of smaller chambers behind it are not empty. They are connected by a living tube called a siphuncle. Through this delicate cord, the Camarasaurus regulates the ratio of gas to fluid within its shell, allowing it to hover in the water column with zero effort. It is a biological submarine, perfectly weighted, drifting through the dark without the need for a single muscular contraction. You feel the eerie, effortless nature of its movement, a massive weight suspended in the void by nothing more than the balance of air and salt. The face of the Titan is a cluster of specialized tools. Its tentacles are thick, muscular, and devoid of the suckers found on modern octopuses. Instead, they are coated in a powerful adhesive mucus and tiny hook-like ridges. They reach out into the black, sensitive to the faintest displacement of water caused by the scuttling of a trilobite or the pulse of a primitive fish. When prey is detected, the tentacles retract with a mechanical snap, hauling the victim toward the center of the ring. There, the black chitinous beak waits a tool capable of exerting hundreds of pounds of pressure, snapping through the mineralized carapaces of the Ordovician's best armored inhabitants. The sensory world of the Camarasaurus is one of vibrations and chemical shadows. While its eyes are large, the utility is limited in the midnight zone. Instead, the creature feels the ocean. It senses the rhythmic thrum of the deep-sea currents and the chemical signature of fear exuded by its prey. You are watching a mind that is ancient and cold, a consciousness tuned to the frequency of the abyss. It does not hunt with the frantic energy of a shark. It is an ambush predator of the highest order, a patient ghost that waits for the world to come to it. The philosophy of the Camarasaurus is the philosophy of the monolith. It represents the height of the external shell strategy. In the eras to come, cephalopods will retreat inside themselves, turning their shells into internal bones to favor speed and agility. But here, the shell is the sovereign. It is both a fortress and a vessel, a testament to a time when life solved the problem of survival through sheer, unyielding structure. You watch as the Titan pulses its siphon, a low-pressure jet of water that sends it backwards into a deeper trench, the long white spire disappearing slowly into the ink. As you linger in the wake of its passage, the silence of the abyss feels heavier. The camera's Ceres is a reminder of the scale of Deep Time's ambition. It ruled for millions of years, a silent sentinel of a cooling planet before the changing chemistry of the oceans and the rise of faster, more agile competitors rendered its massive armor a burden. But in this moment, in the heart of the Ordovician, it is the undisputed master of the darker titan of stone and flesh, drifting through the eternal night. The world has emerged from the icy grip of the Ordovician extinction, and the oceans of the Silurian have become a cradle of architectural splendor. You are drifting into the shallows of a tropical sea, where the water is as warm as blood and clear as a lens. Here, life has moved beyond the horizontal crawl of the seabed to build the first great vertical cities of the deep, the coral reefs. These are not merely clusters of organisms, they are living mountains, carved from the very minerals of the sea by the collective labor of billions of tiny polyps. The sensory immersion of a Silurian reef is overwhelming in its complexity. Unlike the singular drifting giants of the abyss, the reef is a cacophony of textures. You see the tabulate corals forming massive honeycomb-like structures that glow with a faint, translucent green in the sunlight. Beside them, the rugose corals, the horn corals, rise like stony chalices from the sediment, their delicate flower-like tentacles waving in the current to catch microscopic debris. This is the birth of the framework ecosystem, where the dead bodies of one generation provide the foundation for the next, creating a labyrinth of crevices, caves, and spires. This new verticality has transformed the physics of survival. The reef is a three-dimensional puzzle, offering 1,000 hiding places for the vulnerable and 1,000 vantage points for the hunter. You watch as the first jawed fishes, the acanthodians or spiny sharks, dart through the coral canyons. They are the first to possess the mechanical power of a hinged mouth, allowing them to bite rather than simply suction or crush. The reef is their training ground, a high-stakes environment where the ability to maneuver through tight spaces is the difference between a meal and a shallow grave. The philosophy of the Silurian reef is one of interdependence. For the first time, we see the crinoid meadows, animals that look like lilies of stone, their long, segmented stalks swaying in the surge. They are anchored to the coral, filtering the water in a silent, communal dance. The reef has created a stable, localized climate of nutrients and protection, a biological fortress that defies the vast, empty indifference of the open ocean. You feel the pulse of this community, a rhythmic, vibrating hum of life that has finally learned how to build a home that lasts for eons. As you hover over a towering coral head, you realize that these reefs are also the planet's great chemical regulators. By locking away vast amounts of carbon in their limestone skeletons, they are stabilizing the atmosphere, allowing the world to breathe with a new rhythmic consistency. The Silurian is a period of healing and growth, a time when the Earth's biosphere is stitching itself back together with threads of calcium and collagen. The garden of the past has been replaced by a metropolis, a dense, crowded and vibrant center of evolutionary innovation. But the reef is more than just a sanctuary, it is a bridge. In the distance, where the spray of the waves hits the jagged volcanic rocks of the shore, you see a faint, greenish hue clinging to the stone. The oceans are full, and the pressure of life is beginning to push against the boundaries of the water itself. The reefs have provided the stability and the energy needed for the next great leap. As the sun sets, casting long golden shadows across the coral spires, you sense the world is on the verge of a new expansion. The water is no longer enough. The shoreline of the Silurian is a place of violent, unrefined beauty. For 4 billion years, the continents have been a lunar landscape of naked granite, rusted basalt, and shifting dust. The wind has howled across these plains without the interference of a single leaf or the dampening of a single root. But now, at the edge of the world where the spray of the Silurian Sea meets the silent stone, the great migration has begun. You are witnessing the conquest of the coast, a slow, agonizingly patient invasion of the land by the pioneers of the deep. This is not a sudden leap, but a chemical negotiation. The first explorers are the lichens and the primitive mosses, like Cooksonia. They appear as a thin, greenish crust clinging to the damp crevices of the coastal rocks. They are humble, standing only a few millimeters tall, yet they are the most radical rebels in history. They have learned to survive the drying touch of the wind and the unfiltered radiation of the sun. You watch as they anchor themselves into the stone, secreting acids that slowly over millennia dissolve the rock into the planet's very first grains of true soil. Beneath the shadow of these tiny green spears, the first animals are testing the air. You see a creature that resembles a modern millipede, like Pneumodismus, scuttling through the damp debris. It is a pioneer of the respiratory revolution. Unlike its cousins in the sea, it has developed spiracles, tiny primitive openings along its sides that allow it to breathe the thin, oxygen-rich air of the surface. To this creature, the land is a world of terrifying extremes. The heat is more piercing, the cold more biting, and the gravity more relentless than the buoyant embrace of the water. The sensory experience of the coast is one of newfound clarity. The muffled, heavy silence of the ocean is replaced by the sharp, staccato sounds of the terrestrial world. The hiss of the wind through the rocky spires and the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the shore. The smell is no longer the metallic tang of the iron sea, but the first faint, earthy scent of organic decay. You feel the weight of this threshold. The line between the water and the wind is the most significant boundary life has ever crossed. It is the beginning of the upper world. The philosophy of the coast is the philosophy of the frontier. Every millimeter gained by the mosses, every successful breath taken by a millipede, is a victory against the entropy of a sterile planet. These creatures are the architects of a future they cannot comprehend. By breaking down the rock and holding the moisture, they are creating a cradle for the forests and the giants that will follow. You are watching the Earth transform from a water world into a terrestrial garden, a process as slow and inevitable as the cooling of the stars. As the tide recedes, leaving pools of water trapped in the hollows of the rocks, the first land dwellers retreat into the shadows of the crevices. They are still tied to the water, needing its moisture to survive and reproduce, but the tether is stretching. The conquest is a testament to life's inherent restlessness, the refusal to stay contained within the limits of the known. The sun sets over the barren interior of Pangaea, but the edge of the world is glowing with the pale emerald light of the first terrestrial life. The silence of the land is finally being broken. The world has tilted into the Devonian, an epoch so defined by aquatic innovation that it is known forever as the Age of Fishes. You are descending back into the water, but the sea you return to is no longer dominated by the slow-moving armor of the past. The water is alive with a new kind of energy, the energy of the internal skeleton. While the land is beginning to green, the oceans have become a high-speed laboratory for vertebrate design. The blueprints for the modern body, the skull, the spine, and the paired fins are being perfected in the churning currents of the Devonian deep. The sensory landscape is now one of fluid dynamics and vibration. You see the ostracoderms, strange jawless fish encased in bony head shields that look like polished riverstones. They vacuum the sediment with a rhythmic persistence. Their tails a primitive engine of movement. But nearby, the revolutionary design appears, the placoderms. These are the first great masters of the jaw. Their mouths are not merely openings, but mechanical traps lined with bony plates. The snap of a jaw is a new sound in the ocean, a sharp, percussive closure that signals the end of the suction era and the beginning of the bite. This internal structural revolution has granted life a newfound agility. By moving the skeleton inside the body, fish have freed their skin to become a sensory organ. You can feel the water pressure shifting as a school of primitive ray-finned fish darts past, their bodies shimmering like mercury. They possess the first lateral minds, a row of sensory cells that allow them to feel the movement of every other creature in the dark. The ocean is no longer a silent void. It is a grid of pressure waves, a tactile map that allows for schooling, evasion, and precision hunting. The philosophy of the Devonian is the philosophy of the inner core. The development of the spine has created a central axis of intent, a highway for nerve impulses that allows the brain to communicate with the tail in a fraction of a second. This is the birth of the vertebrate will. You watch a lobe-finned fish, a sarcopterygian, as it maneuvers through a forest of sea lilies. Its fins are not thin rays but fleshy muscular appendages supported by bone, the distant aquatic ancestors of your own arms and legs. It moves with a deliberate, heavy grace, a bridge between the fluid world and the solid. The vastness of the Devonian oceans provides the space for these designs to reach terrifying proportions. In the distance, the water grows dark and the smaller fish scatter into the crevices of the reef. A presence is approaching that dwarfs everything you have seen since the Ordovician Titans. It is the apex of the placoderm design, a creature of ironclad logic and immense power. The Age of Fishes is about to produce its most famous nightmare, a sentinel of the deep that will define the limits of prehistoric predation. As you hover in the wake of the retreating schools, the scale of this evolutionary leap becomes clear. The transition from the external shell to the internal bone has unlocked a potential for size and speed that was previously impossible. The Earth's oceans are no longer just a place where life happens, they are a place where life excels. The sun filters down through the surface, illuminating the first true scales, 1,000 tiny mirrors reflecting the dawn of a new biological empire. The Devonian Sea is a place of shadows, but no shadow is as heavy or as final as that of Dunkleosteus. You are drifting in the open water of a prehistoric seaway, watching as the smaller, agile fish vanish into the coral thickets. From the gloom emerges a predator that looks less like a living animal and more like a submerged war machine. At 10 meters long and weighing several tons, it is the undisputed titan of the Age of Fishes, a placoderm that has abandoned the delicate scales of its cousins for a massive interlocking suit of bone. The sensory focus of this creature is its header-blunt, armored battering ram. Unlike modern sharks, Dunkleosteus does not have teeth. Instead, the bony plates of its skull extend downward to form two pairs of jagged, self-sharpening blades. You watch as it opens its mouth with a speed that defies its massive size. Through a unique 4-bar linkage mechanism in its skull, it can drop its lower jaw and raise its upper shield simultaneously in a fraction of a second. This movement creates a powerful vacuum, a negative pressure vortex that sucks prey into the dark cavern of its throat before the victim even realizes the shadow has arrived. The sound of a Dunkleosteus strike would be a dull hydraulic thud, followed by the horrific grinding of bone on bone. Its bite force is calculated to be among the highest in the history of life, rivaling that of the great dinosaurs that will not appear for another 100 million years. It does not simply kill, it shatters. It can cleave through the thickest armor of a contemporary shark, or the mineralized shell of a giant cephalopod with the ease of a hot blade through wax. It is a creature of absolute mechanical efficiency, a biological guillotine designed for a world where everyone is armored. The philosophy of Dunkleosteus is one of uncompromising power. It is the pinnacle of the armored fish lineage, a design that chose protection and crushing force over the lightweight speed of the emerging ray-finned fish. You feel the vibration of its passage, a low-frequency thrum that resonates in the water. Despite its terrifying exterior, it is a creature of deep-time necessity. By preying on the largest and most armored inhabitants of the sea, it drives the evolution of speed and intelligence in everything else. It is the grim reaper of the Devonian, pruning the tree of life with its iron jaws. As you hover near its passing tail, you notice the paradox of its existence. While its head is a fortress of bone, its rear body is relatively soft and shark-like, built for powerful bursts of propulsion. It is a transitional nightmare, a hybrid of the old world's armor and the new world's athleticism. But the sun is setting on the placoderms. Their heavy bones are attacks on energy that the changing oceans will soon no longer support. Even this ironclad king is a temporary tenant of the deep, a magnificent experiment in the limits of biological weight. The Titan turns, its small dark eye catching a glint of the dying surface light. It disappears back into the cold, pressurized silence of the deepest shelf, leaving the water vibrating in its wake. The Age of Fishes has reached its zenith. But while the giants rule the water, a new, quieter revolution is happening. In the shallows, a movement of fins that are becoming feet, and lungs that are learning to crave the wind. The shadow of the iron jaw is long, but the future belongs to those who can leave the water behind. The roar of the open ocean and the crushing bite of the iron-jawed giants fade into a rhythmic, muddy silence. You are drifting in the stagnant shallows of a Devonian estuary, a world of tea-colored water, tangles of primitive roots, and low-hanging mist. Here, the water is warm and oxygen-poor, a suffocating environment for the giants of the deep. But in this marginal space, a creature is poised at the most significant intersection in the history of life. This is Tiktaalik, the large freshwater fish, and it stands quite literally on the threshold of a new existence. Its form is a haunting compromise between two worlds. At first glance, it is a fish, covered in scales and possessing a dorsal fin. but as you look closer at its head, the fish-like taper has been replaced by a flat, crocodile-like snout. Its eyes are positioned on the top of its skull, peering upward through the surface tension into the blurred, brilliant world of the air. Most importantly, it possesses something no fish before it ever had: a neck. It can move its head independently of its body, scanning the muddy banks with a predatory intent that is no longer confined to the horizontal plane of the water. The sensory experience of the Tiktaalik threshold is one of profound transition. You watch as it pushes itself up through the silt. Its pectoral fins are not delicate fans of bone. They are muscular, sturdy appendages with internal joints, wrists and elbows that can bear the weight of its body against the riverbed. As it heaves its front half out of the water, the sound is a wet, heavy slide against the mud. For the first time, a vertebrate is experiencing the full, unmitigated weight of gravity. It is a struggle of inches, a slow-motion heist of the terrestrial world, fueled by the desperate need to find oxygen and escape the predators of the deep. This is the birth of the tetrapod mind. Within this creature, the brain is beginning to process a world of 3 dimensions without the support of buoyancy. The air is sharp and dry, and the sun feels like a physical weight upon its damp skin. You are witnessing the first look, the moment life realized that the horizon was not a limit, but a destination. There is a philosophical weight to this struggle. Tiktaalik is the ancestor of every creature that will ever walk, from the smallest lizard to the human being who will one day uncover its bones. The philosophy of the threshold is the philosophy of the in-between. Life is often defined by its extremes, but the most transformative moments occur in the transitions. Tiktaalik is neither a creature of the sea nor a creature of the land. It is the bridge. It represents the courage of the biological blueprint to fail in one environment in order to succeed in another. In the water, it is slow. On land, it is clumsy, but in the shallows, it is the master of a new frontier. It is the architect of the lung and the pioneer of the limb, a silent witness to the fading age of the fishes. As the sun begins to set, casting long golden fingers across the muddy estuary, Tiktaalik slips back into the water with a quiet ripple. It is not yet ready to leave the nursery of the deep, but the invitation of the land has been accepted. The air has been tasted, the weight of the world has been felt, and the blueprint for the conquest of the continents has been etched into the marrow of its bones. The silence of the land is waiting, and the era of the great forest is just over the horizon. The world has become a cathedral of emerald and shadow. You have left the muddy estuaries of the Devonian behind and entered the Carboniferous period where the earth is breathing with a deep oxygen-rich intensity that will never be matched again. The atmosphere is a heavy, intoxicating veil, nearly 35% oxygen, a chemical state that pushes the metabolism of all living things into a higher gear. You are drifting through a drowned forest, a silent, flooded world where the boundary between the land and the water has dissolved into a labyrinth of swamp and mist. The architecture of this world is alien and vertical. Rising from the black stagnant water are the lepidodendrons, the scale trees. They are not trees in the modern sense, but giant, woody club mosses that soar 30 meters into the humid air. Their trunks are diamond-patterned, scarred with the geometric traces of fallen leaves, and they do not branch until they reach the very canopy. Below them, the sigillaria rise like fluted columns, their tops crowned with grassy fronds. There are no flowers here, no fruit and no autumn colors. There is only a monolithic, unchanging green, a vertical empire built on the dampness of the ancient earth. The sensory landscape is one of oppressive dampness and profound weight. The air is so thick it feels almost liquid, carrying the scent of damp moss, resin, and the first faint traces of peat. There is no sound of birds or the rustle of mammals. The only music is the rhythmic drip-drip of condensed fog falling from the canopy into the dark water below. The light is filtered through layers of emerald lace, reaching the forest floor as a bruised underwater glow. You are walking through the coal swamps, a world that is essentially a massive planetary-scale carbon trap, burying the sunlight of the Paleozoic beneath the mud. In the shadows of the giant mosses, the physics of the atmosphere allow for nightmares of scale. Because the air is so saturated with oxygen, the respiratory systems of invertebrates, which rely on passive diffusion, are no longer limited by size. You see a centipede-like arthropleura winding its way through the rotting logs. It is over 2 meters long, a segmented armored train that leaves deep furrows in the soft earth. The water-V, quiet and canity mud. The water is heavy, clicking against the bark, a sound that marks it as the largest terrestrial invertebrate to ever walk the planet. The philosophy of the Carboniferous is one of excess and accumulation. This is the era of the Great Burial, because the fungi and bacteria of this time have not yet evolved the enzymes to break down lignin, the structural heart of wood. The fallen trees do not rot. They simply pile up, layer upon layer, in the anaerobic silence of the swamps. You are standing on the literal foundation of the industrial world. The pressure of the next 300 million years will turn this moss and wood into the coal seams that will eventually power a human civilization. As the sun sets, the twilight of the Carboniferous becomes literal. The density of the forest and the thickness of the air swallow the light, leaving you in a humid, oxygen-heavy darkness. The world feels claustrophobic, a hothouse of immense growth and silent decay. You are a witness to a planet at its most lush. A world that has traded the open horizons of the sea for the vertical complexity of the woods. But in the canopy above, a new sound begins. The first heavy, rhythmic beat of wings. The insects have taken to the air, and the conquest of the sky has begun. The humid air of the Carboniferous is not just a gas, it is a pressurized medium, a thick, oxygen-rich fluid that supports the weight of a new kind of titan. As you drift through the emerald halls of the scale tree forests, the silence of the dripping moss is suddenly shattered by a sound that feels physical, a low, rhythmic thrumming like the beat of a distant drum. It is the sound of Meganeura moni, the giant dragonfly, cutting through the stagnant air. With a wingspan of over 70 centimeters, it is a hawk in the body of an insect, a master of the aerial frontier. The physics of its flight are a direct result of the air's atmospheric excess. In this high-pressure world, the air provides more lift and more fuel for the frantic metabolism of flight. You watch as Meganeura hovers with a terrifying mechanical precision between the fluted trunks of the Sigillaria. Its forewings move independently, a blur of translucent chitin and complex venation that shimmer like oil on water. This is the pulse, a vibration so powerful it stirs the mist and ripples the surface of the black swamp water below. It is the first time the sky has been conquered by a creature with intent. Up close, the dragonfly is a marvel of predatory engineering. Its head is dominated by two massive compound eyes, each containing 30,000 lenses, granting it a panoramic view of the forest. It sees the world in high-speed motion, tracking the scuttle of a primitive cockroach or the glide of a small insect with the cold, mathematical focus of a targeting computer. Its legs are lined with sharp, inward-curving spines, forming a predatory basket that can snatch prey out of the air at high velocities. There is no mercy in its design, only the lethal efficiency of the first aerial apex predator. The sensory experience of Meganeura is one of speed and light. To fly at this scale is to experience the Carboniferous not as a slow, humid crawl, but as a series of rapid transitions. The forest becomes a blur of vertical lines, the air a resistant force to be harnessed. You feel the displacement of the atmosphere as it passes, a sudden gust of wind, followed by the fading hum of its wings. It represents a liberation from the mud and the water, a move into the third dimension that changes the stakes of survival forever. The philosophy of the giant wing is a reflection on the transience of biological limits. The scale of Meganeura is a temporary gift from the atmosphere. It is a creature built for a world of 35% oxygen. When the oxygen levels eventually fall, these giants will vanish, their respiratory systems unable to sustain such massive frames. But for now, they are the sovereigns of the wind. They remind us that life will always expand to fill the available space, pushing the boundaries of size and complexity until the laws of physics demand a retreat. As the dragonfly settles onto a diamond-patterned branch, its wings remain spread, catching the bruised purple light of the setting sun. The pulse fades into a quiet metallic clicking as it adjusts its position. The sky is no longer a void, it is a habitat. Beneath the giant wings of Meganeura, the world has grown larger, more dangerous, and infinitely more complex. The conquest of the air has turned the Earth into a truly global theatre, where even the shadows have wings. The air in the deep Carboniferous forest is thick with the scent of resin, but there is a strange absence in the sensory landscape, the smell of decay. In a modern forest, a fallen trunk is an ecosystem of its own, quickly claimed by the fuzzy white threads of fungi and the soft rot of bacteria. But here, you are walking over a graveyard of giants that refuses to vanish. The lepidodendron logs lie piled like the columns of a ruined temple, stacked 10 deep in the black water, yet they remain structurally sound, their diamond-patterned bark as sharp as the day they fell. This is the lignin paradox, the biological stalemate that changed the chemistry of the planet. At the heart of this mystery is lignin, the complex organic polymer that gives these ancient club mosses their rigid strength. It is the steel of the plant world, a molecular knot so tight and resilient that in this era, nothing on Earth knows how to untie it. The fungi and microbes of the Carboniferous are still tuned to the simpler sugars of the past. They lack the specific enzymes, the white rot peroxidases required to break down this new, woody architecture. You are witnessing a world out of balance, where the rate of production has vastly outpaced the rate of recycling. Life has learned to build, but it has not yet learned how to reclaim. The physical consequence of this paradox is a massive, planetary-scale sequestration of carbon. Because the wood cannot rot, the carbon it gathered from the atmosphere during its life is not returned to the air as carbon dioxide. Instead is buried. You feel the ground beneath you are. A soft, spongy layer of peat that stretches down for hundreds of meters. Every step you take is on the compressed remains of 1,000 years of sunlight. As the rising seas of the late Carboniferous periodically drown these forests, layers of silt and sand bury the wood deeper, subjecting it to the slow, agonizing heat and pressure of the Earth's crust. This process is the birth of the coal measures. The paradox is the reason for the industrial modern world. The coal that powers human civilization is the direct result of a 30 million year gap in the evolution of fungi. Had a single microbe learned to digest lignin a few million years earlier, the vast coal seams of Europe and North America would simply not exist. You are looking at a stutter in the cycle of life, a period where the Earth's carbon cycle ran in only one direction, pulling the greenhouse gases out of the sky and locking them into the dark, cold stone of the future. The philosophy of the paradox is a meditation on the unintended consequences of innovation. The trees evolved lignin to reach the light, to outcompete their neighbors in the vertical race for the sun. But in doing so, they nearly suffocated the planet's climate. The plummeting levels of carbon dioxide caused by this massive burial of wood triggered a cooling trend that would eventually lead to the end of the lush, humid world you are currently walking through. The success of the tree was the undoing of the swamp. As you watch a massive sigillaria collapse into the tea-colored water, its splash is the only sound in the stagnant air. It will lie there for eons, undecayed and untouched, a silent witness to a time when the Earth's recycling system was broken. The sky above is a brilliant, oxygen-rich blue, a side effect of this carbon burial, but the cold is coming. The lignin paradox is a reminder that in the deep time of the Earth, even the smallest gap in the tree of life can leave a signature that lasts for 300 million years. The high oxygen haze of the Carboniferous is beginning to thin, and with it, the absolute rain of the swamps is faltering. You are standing on a drying bank of mud and fallen ferns, watching a creature that looks like a small, sleek lizard Hylonomus move with a new kind of confidence. It is not tethered to the water by the desperate need to keep its skin moist, nor is it bound by the ancestral requirement to return to the pools to lay its eggs. This creature carries the ocean with it. You are witnessing the amniotic revolution, the biological breakthrough that allowed life to finally turn its back on the water and claim the heart of the continents. The centerpiece of this revolution is a piece of exquisite biological engineering, the amniotic egg. You see it nestled in a hollow of dry earth, shielded by a semi-permeable shell that feels like parchment. Inside this vessel, the embryo is surrounded by a series of specialized membranes, the amnion, the chorion, and the allantois. These membranes act as a life support system, providing a private pond for the developing creature, a waste disposal unit, and a respiratory interface. It is a portable nursery that protects the life within from the drying touch of the air while allowing it to breathe the oxygen of the upper world. The sensory experience of this shift is one of newfound dryness. The wet, slimy skin of the amphibians you encountered in the Devonian has been replaced by the dry, scaly hide of the first reptiles. These scales are made of keratin, the same substance as your own fingernails, creating a waterproof barrier that locks the animal's internal fluids inside. You can hear the dry, raspy sound of Hylanoma scuttling over the dead fronds, a sound that was impossible in the age of the wet skin. Life has become self-contained, a pressurized vessel of water navigating a desert of air. This liberation has profound philosophical implications. To be an amniote is to be a creature of the interior. By breaking the cycle of the waterside birth, life has unlocked the vast, untapped landscapes of the inner continents. The pond is no longer a physical place, it is a biological memory carried within the shell. You feel the weight of this expansion. The Earth's landmasses, once a hostile vacuum for vertebrates, are now a wide open frontier. The amniotic egg is the key that unlocked the rest of the planet, paving the way for the dinosaurs, the birds, and eventually the mammals. The atmosphere of this era is one of increasing complexity. The development of the egg required a change in behavior, internal fertilization. This brought about the first complex rituals of courtship and the first inklings of territoriality that were not tied to the seasonal flooding of a swamp. Life is becoming more individualistic, more competitive, and more resilient. You watch as a small group of Hylonomas hunts for insects in the drying undergrowth, their movement sharp and precise. They are the heralds of a new world order, where the land is no longer an obstacle, but a home. As the sun sets over the retreating swamps, the first amniotes do not retreat with the water. They remain in the shadows of the drying scale trees, their eggs safe in the warming earth. The umbilical cord to the primordial sea has been cut. The silence of the deep interior is no longer a sign of sterility. It is a canvas waiting for the footsteps of the giants. The amniotic revolution has turned the Earth from a world of coastlines into a world of continents, and the age of the reptiles is about to dawn in the dust of the Permian. The lush, humid cathedrals of the Carboniferous have collapsed. The Earth has exhaled its moisture, and the continents have ground together to form a single colossal landmass, Pangaea. You are standing in the heart of this supercontinent, a place of staggering scale and brutal extremes. The horizon is no longer blocked by the vertical walls of scale trees. It is a vast, shimmering expanse of red dust and scrubland. The air is dry, smelling of parched earth and ozone, and the wind carries the heat of a continental interior that has forgotten the taste of rain. The sensory landscape of the Permian is one of openness and distance. Without the dampening effect of the swamps, the sun strikes the ground with a relentless, unfiltered intensity. The temperature swings are violent, scorching beneath the noon sun and plummeting into a brittle cold as the stars emerge. You can feel the static in the dry air, a tension that was absent in a humid past. Life here has had to adapt to a world that is no longer a garden but a fortress. The vegetation has hardened, the soft ferns are being replaced by the first conifers and ginkgos, plants with waxy needles designed to hold every precious drop of moisture against the desiccating wind. The physics of Pangaea have created a climate of mega-monsoons. Because the landmass is so large, its interior becomes a vacuum for weather, sucking moisture from the distant oceans in violent seasonal bursts, only to leave the plains in a state of baking drought for the rest of the year. You see the evidence of this in the landscape, dry riverbeds or wadis that wait for the flash floods, and vast fields of dunes that migrate across the horizon like slow golden predators. The silence here is vast, punctuated only by the whistle of the wind through the needles of the ancient pines. In this harsh arena, a new lineage of life is rising to dominance, the synapsids. These are the mammal-like reptiles, and they have mastered the art of terrestrial survival. You see them moving across the plains, creatures like Edaphosaurus, with its massive sail-backed spine. They are no longer the sprawled, sluggish creatures of the swamps. Their limbs are moving beneath their bodies, providing a more efficient gait for crossing the immense distances of the Permian interior. They are the pioneers of the high metabolism lifestyle, using their sails to harvest the morning sun and dump the afternoon heat. The philosophy of the Permian Plains is one of resilience and grit. It is a world that demands a high price for entry. To survive here, life has had to develop complex skin, efficient kidneys, and the behavioral intelligence to seek shade and water. You feel the weight of this struggle, the sheer tenacity required to exist in a landscape that seems actively trying to dry you into dust. This is the forge of the modern world. The pressures of Pangaea are refining the ancestors of the mammals, sharpening their senses and hardening their resolve for a future that will test them to the breaking point. As the sun sets, casting shadows that stretch for miles across the red dust, the Permian Plains turn a deep, bruised crimson. The silence returns, but it is the silence of a world that is fully awake. The vastness of Pangaea is a reminder of the Earth's capacity for transformation from a drowned swamp to a sun-baked empire. Beneath the cold light of the stars, the ancestors of humanity huddle in the scrub, waiting for the dawn of a new era, unaware that the greatest catastrophe in the history of life is slowly gathering in the shadows of the horizon. Across the iron-red floodplains of Pangaea, a silhouette moves that is both beautiful and unsettling. It is Dimetrodon, the apex predator of the early Permian, a creature that carries a magnificent, fan-like sail upon its back. Despite its reptilian appearance, Dimetrodon is not a dinosaur. It is a synapsid, a member of the lineage that will eventually give rise to your own. You're watching a distant cousin of humanity, a creature that has mastered the brutal thermodynamics of the Permian interior by turning its own spine into a sophisticated solar collector. The sail is a masterpiece of prehistoric engineering. It is composed of elongated neural spines extensions of the vertebrae covered in a thin, highly vascularized membrane of skin. As the sun rises over the parched horizon, Dimetrodon positions itself perpendicular to the golden rays. The sensory experience of this moment is one of warming blood. The sail acts as a heat exchanger, absorbing the solar energy and pumping warmed blood back into the core of its 4-meter-long body. This allows it to awaken and hunt while its prey colder, sluggish reptiles remain trapped in the lethargy of the morning chill. In the heat of the afternoon, the sail reverses its function. By turning into the wind or seeking the shade of a ginkgo grove, Dimetrodon can radiate excess heat away from its body, preventing its brain from overheating in the baking sun. You can almost feel the rhythmic pulsing of the blood through those delicate membranes, a silent internal engine regulating the fires of life. This thermal advantage grants the creature a level of activity and aggression that the world has never seen. It is a predator that does not wait for the world to warm up. It brings its own heat. The face of Dimetrodon reveals the beginning of another mammalian trait, specialized teeth. Its name means two-measure tooth, referring to the sharp, shearing incisors at the front of its mouth and the smaller grinding teeth at the back. You watch as it tracks a smaller herbivore across the dry riverbed, its movements purposeful and efficient. It possesses a high-stepping gait, with its limbs positioned slightly more beneath its body than the sprawled ancestors of the Carboniferous. This is the birth of the active hunter, a creature whose metabolism is beginning to demand a constant, high-energy fuel. The philosophy of the solar sail is a meditation on the cost of complexity. To maintain a larger body and a sharper mind, Dimetrodon must engage in a constant negotiation with the environment. It is no longer a passive resident of the planet. It is a sophisticated biological machine that must actively manage its energy levels to survive. You feel the weight of this evolutionary step, the movement away from the cold-blooded stasis of the past toward the warm-blooded ambition of the future. The sail is a temporary, external solution to a problem that mammals will eventually solve internally. But for now, it is the crown of the Permian. As the sun begins to set, casting the long, serrated shadow of the sail across the red dust, Dimetrodon settles into a hollow of scrubland. The heat of the day is stored in its marrow, allowing it to remain active for a few precious hours of the twilight. The sail, now a dark, silent silhouette against the violet sky, is a monument to life's ingenuity in a world of extremes. It's the sovereign of the plains, a titan of heat and bone, unaware that its lineage is being shaped by the very sun it seeks to harness. As the Permian progresses, the solar sailors of the early plains give way to a more refined, more mammalian brand of terror. You are standing on the arid steppes of late Pangaea, where the air is thin and the silence is sharp. From the shimmering heat haze emerges a Gorgonopsid, a creature that represents the absolute zenith of synapsid evolution before the Great Dying. It is the Gorgon face, a predator that has discarded the external sails of the past for an internal furnace of rising metabolism and a skull built for a singular, devastating purpose: the kill. The sensory focus of the Gorgonopsid is its mouth. For the first time in history, you are looking into the face of a saber-toothed predator. Its upper canines are massive, serrated daggers of bone that extend far below its lower jaw, designed to pierce the thick, leathery hides of the massive herbivores that roam the interior. This is the birth of specialized predation. Unlike the crushing, hydraulic bite of Dunkleosteus, the Gorgonopsid is a surgical killer, targeting the soft tissues and major arteries of its prey with the precision of a bayonet. The mechanics of its movement are hauntingly familiar. Its legs are no longer sprawled to the sides in the reptilian fashion. They are tucked more directly under its torso, allowing for a galloping mammalian gait that can cover vast distances of the Pangean steppe. You can feel the vibration of its approach, not the sluggish thrum of a cold-blooded beast, but the light, rhythmic tapping of an athlete. Its skin is thick, perhaps even beginning to sprout the very first hints of sensory bristles, the precursors to fur. It is a creature of the in-between, a reptilian body possessed by a mammalian spirit. The philosophy of the Gorgonopsid is the philosophy of the specialized tool. In the harsh, resource-poor environment of the late Permian, there is no room for error. Every calorie spent on the hunt must be returned with interest. This predator is the regulator of the steppe, the shadow that forces the massive, tusked Dicynodonts to move in herds and the armored Parasaurs to thicken their skin. It represents the first time life has developed the saber-tooth body plan, a design so effective that evolution will return to it again and again, from the Nimravids to the famous Smilodon of the human ice ages. As you watch the Gorgonopsid scan the horizon, its large, forward-facing eyes catch the dying light of a cooling sun. There is an intelligence in its gaze that was absent in the abnormal shrimp or the iron jaw. It is a creature capable of tracking, of patience, and perhaps even of rudimentary social planning. You feel the weight of this impending tragedy. This is the most sophisticated animal the Earth has ever produced, a masterpiece of 300 million years of vertebrate labor. It is the king of a world that is, unknown to it, already beginning to die. The sun sets behind the jagged peaks of the rising Ural Mountains, casting a long, predatory shadow across the dust. The Gorgonopsid lets out a low, raspy hiss as a sound of the dry, hot air passing through a complex nasal cavity designed to conserve moisture. It is perfectly adapted to its world, but its world is about to change in a way that no amount of specialized teeth or mammalian grace can survive. The Great Dying is no longer a distant threat. It is an atmospheric inevitability, gathering its strength in the volcanic fires of the northern wastes. The stability of the Permian steppes is an illusion, a fragile mask over a planet that is beginning to fracture from within. You are standing in the far north of Pangaea, in a region we will one day call Siberia, but the ground beneath you is no longer solid. It is a weeping, incandescent wound. The Earth's crust has split open, not in a single volcanic peak, but in a series of colossal fissures that stretch for hundreds of miles. This is the beginning of the Siberian Traps, a pulse of flood basalt volcanism so vast it will eventually cover an area the size of a continent in molten rock. The sensory experience is one of atmospheric collapse. The sky is no longer blue. It is a thick, jaundiced yellow, choked with trillions of tons of sulfur dioxide and ash. The sun is a pale, sickly ghost, its light struggling to pierce the volcanic veil. The air tastes of acid and burnt stone, a suffocating mixture that stings the lungs of the Gorgonopsids and poisons the plants they rely on. But the true horror is not the fire, it is the invisible gas. The volcanoes are venting massive quantities of carbon dioxide, triggering a greenhouse effect that will drive the planet's temperature upward by 10 degrees Celsius in a geological heartbeat. As the land heats, the oceans begin to respond. You descend into the water, but the vibrant reefs of the past have gone. The warming oceans can no longer hold oxygen. They are becoming anoxic, stagnant pools of lethargy. Even worse, the excess carbon dioxide is dissolving into the water, turning the seas acidic. You watch as the delicate shells of the last trilobites and the intricate structures of the corals begin to literally dissolve in the water, their calcium carbonate skeletons eaten away by the changing chemistry of the deep. The ocean is turning into a graveyard of chemical soup. The philosophy of this moment is one of total systemic failure. In the past, extinctions were often localized or driven by a single predator or a brief ice age. But the Great Dying is a cascading collapse. The death of the plants leads to the starvation of the herbivores, which leads to the extinction of the saber-toothed kings. The warming of the oceans triggers the release of methane chythrates from the seafloor and methane plathrates from the seafloor and methane burp that doubles the warming and accelerates the cycle of death. It is a world where every survival strategy of the last 300 million years has been rendered obsolete by a change in the air. You feel the silence of the deep interior growing. The rhythmic clicking of the insects and the raspy breath of the synapsids are fading, replaced by the low, constant roar of the distant fires and the hiss of acid rain hitting the red dust. The Earth is being sterilized, its biodiversity pruned with a violence that borders on the absolute. This is the mother of all extinctions, a moment when the flame of life flickers so low that it nearly disappears into the void of space. As the first million years of the eruption draw to a close, the landscape of Pangaea is a charred, featureless waste. The landscape of Pangaea is a charred, featureless waste. The sovereigns of the steppe are gone, their specialized teeth useless against a world with nothing left to bite. You are witnessing the end of the Paleozoic era, the closing of the first great chapter of complex life. The darkness is total, the heat is unyielding, and the planet is waiting to see if anything at all, has the resilience to endure the fire. The world has become a monochromatic ghost. The fires of the Siberian traps have settled into a low, smouldering glow. But the damage to the biosphere is absolute. You are drifting through a silent, stagnant ocean, a liquid desert that has claimed 96% of all marine species. The vibrant, busy reefs of the Silurian and Devonian are now nothing more than crumbling limestone ruins, covered in a thick, slimy carpet of microbial mats. These disaster taxa are all that remain, thriving in a world where the oxygen has vanished and the water has turned to a warm, acidic broth. The sensory experience of this near-dead planet is one of harrowing emptiness. There are no schools of fish darting through the gloom, no shadows of giant cephalopods, no rhythmic clicking of trilobite legs. The water is a hazy, jaundiced green, saturated with hydrogen sulfide, the rotten egg gas, produced by anaerobic bacteria thriving in the oxygen-free depths. This gas bubbles to the surface, poisoning the air and turning the sky a sickly, bruised shade of green. You are witnessing a world that has reverted to its most primitive state, a biological regression that has erased 300 million years of progress. On land, the statistics are equally grim. 70% of terrestrial vertebrate families have vanished. The Great Plains of Pangaea, once home to the majestic gorgonopsids and the sail-backed dimetrodon, are now featureless expanses of red dust and rotting wood. The silence is no longer the peaceful quiet of a forest. It is the heavy, suffocating silence of a tomb. The lignin paradox has finally been solved by the heat and the acid. As the vast coal swamps of the past are vaporized by the lava or dissolved by the rain, pumping even more carbon into the runaway greenhouse atmosphere. The philosophy of this era is a somber reflection on the fragility of complexity. We often view evolution as an inevitable march toward progress, but the Great Dine reminds us that life is a guest of the planet's chemistry. When the carbon cycle breaks, the most sophisticated and specialized creatures are the first to fall. The masterpieces of the Permian, the saber teeth, the armored shields, the complex eyes were too finely tuned to a world that no longer exists. You feel the weight of human insignificance against this backdrop. The Earth can, and has, hit the reset button, reducing the library of life to a few tattered pages. In this landscape of ash and slime, the only survivors are the generalists, the small, the burrowing, and the unremarkable. They are the weeds of the animal kingdom, creatures that could tolerate the low oxygen and the toxic heat. You see a small tusked burrower huddled in a hole, breathing air that would kill a titan. This is the bottleneck of history. Every creature that will ever exist in the future, every dinosaur, every bird, every human must pass through the needle's eye of these few surviving lineages. The flame of life has not been extinguished, but it has been reduced to a single flickering ember. As the sun sets over a world without birdsong or insect hum, the stars seem brighter, colder, and more indifferent than ever. The Earth is a scarred, smoking rock, a place of extreme heat and chemical poison. But even here, in the heart of the greatest tragedy the planet has ever known, the law of persistence remains. The bacteria continue to churn, the burrowers continue to breathe, and the Earth continues to spin. The Paleozoic is over. The ancient deep has closed its doors, and the long, agonizingly slow recovery of the Triassic is about to begin in the dust of the ruins. The furnace of the Permian has finally cooled, leaving behind a world that is quiet, scarred, and remarkably empty. You are standing on the banks of a river in the early Triassic, a time of profound, tentative beauty. The air is still thin, and the heat remains a heavy presence, but the acid rain has ceased. The recovery is not a sudden bloom. It is a slow, agonizingly patient reclamation of the void. Life is no longer a grand, roaring machine. It is a fragile network of survivors, stitching the biosphere back together one burrow and one sprout at a time. The sensory landscape of the recovery is one of minimalism. The vast, drowned forests of the past are gone, replaced by disaster gardens of hardy lycopods and ferns that colonize the ash-choked plains. There is a strange, translucent quality to the light, reflecting off a landscape that lacks the deep shadows of complex vegetation. You see the first Lazarus taxa lineages that seem to vanish during the Great Dying, only to reappear from hidden deep-water refuges. The water is clearing, the jaundiced green of the hydrogen sulfide era fading into a pale, hopeful grey. In the shallows of the sea, the microbial mats that once blanketed the ruins are being pushed back. You see the return of the mollusks and the first small, cautious crustaceans. They are not the giants of the past, but they are industrious. The recovery is a time of evolutionary opportunism. With 96% of the competition gone, the survivors find themselves in a world of infinite, empty niches. You watch as a small, lizard-like reptile, a precursor to the great marine giants, returns to the water, its limbs beginning the long, slow transformation back into paddles. The philosophy of the Triassic recovery is the philosophy of the blank slate. While the loss of the Paleozoic world was a tragedy of unimaginable scale, it has cleared the stage for a new kind of creativity. The rules of the past, the heavy armor, the specialized teeth, the massive shells have been discarded. Life is experimenting with lighter, faster, and more metabolically efficient designs. You feel the tension of this transition. The Earth is a laboratory where the survivors are drafting the blueprints for the Mesozoic era, the age of the dinosaurs and the rise of the mammals. The most successful survivor of this era is Lystrocerosia, a tusked, pig-sized dicynodont. In the aftermath of the extinction, this single genus accounts for nearly 90% of all terrestrial vertebrates on Earth. You see them everywhere. Their rhythmic grunting and the sound of their tusks digging for roots providing the only soundtrack to the plains. They are the golden spike of the recovery, a testament to the power of the generalist. They do not need a specialized world, they only need the will to endure. As the sun sets over the Triassic horizon, the world feels less like a tomb and more like a nursery. The recovery will take 10 million years to reach the levels of diversity seen in the Permian. A reminder that while destruction is a sudden flash, healing is a generational labor. You are witnessing the dawn of a new world, a place where the shadows are small, but the potential is infinite. The ancient deep has been replaced by a new frontier, and the first notes of a different kind of life are beginning to vibrate in the cooling air. In the wake of the greatest catastrophe the planet has ever endured, the throne of the world does not sit upon a mountain of gold, but in a burrow of dust. You are looking at the face of the ultimate survivor, Lystrosaurus. It is a creature of humble proportions, roughly the size of a modern pig, with a barrel-shaped body and a face that seems to have been blunt forced into a permanent tusk scowl. Yet in the early Triassic, this singular genus achieved a feat of dominance that no other vertebrate has ever matched. For a brief, strange window in deep time, nearly 9 out of every 10 land animals on Earth were Lystrosaurus. The sensory experience of this creature is one of absolute utility. It is a dicynodont, a two-tusked synapsid, and its anatomy is a testament to the virtues of the generalist. Its mouth is a powerful, horny beak, backed by 2 downward-pointing tusks designed for unearthing the hardy tubers and roots that survived the Permian fires. You watch as it moves across the sparse, fern-covered plains, its powerful forelimbs digging into the baked earth with a rhythmic, mechanical efficiency. It does not need the lush forests of the past. It is a creature of the scrub, a biological tank built to process the coarsest fuel the planet has to offer. But the secret to its survival lies in its chest. The atmosphere of the early Triassic is a hypoxic nightmare, thin, hot, and desperately low in oxygen. Lystrosaurus has adapted with an oversized ribcage and a massive lung capacity, allowing it to thrive in air that would leave its competitors gasping and spent. It is also a master of the burrow. By retreating beneath the surface of the Earth, it escapes the lethal temperature swings of the Pangaean interior and the scouring winds of the dust storms. You can hear the low, raspy sound of its breathing as it huddles in the dark, a steady, unyielding pulse of life in a world of silence. The philosophy of Lystrosaurus is the philosophy of the everyman. It is not the fastest, the largest, or the most lethal, but it is the most resilient. It represents the bottleneck of the mammalian lineage. Every complexity of the human mind, every nuance of our emotional lives, was carried through the fire within the sturdy, unglamorous frame of this tusked survivor. It is a reminder that in the grand theatre of deep time, the fittest is not always the strongest, but the one most capable of tolerating the worst the universe can throw at it. As you watch a herd of Lystrosaurus migrate across a dry riverbed, their movements are slow but certain. They are the bridge between the old world of the Paleozoic and the coming age of the Mesozoic. They have inherited a planet that is a blank canvas, and by simply refusing to die, they are providing the foundation for everything that is to come. There is a quiet dignity in their persistence, a sense that the earth belongs not to the kings but to those who can live in the dust. The sun sets over the Triassic plains, casting a long shadow from the blunt snout of a lone survivor. It continues to dig, indifferent to its status as the savior of a lineage. The great dying has been outlasted. The vacuum of the extinction is being filled by the constant, rhythmic work of the tusks and the steady beat of the massive lungs. The recovery is no longer a possibility. It is a reality, carried on the back of the great survivor. The long, violent arc of the Paleozoic has finally settled into the quiet dust of the Triassic dawn. You are drifting upward now, leaving the parched plains and the recovering seas behind, rising through the layers of the atmosphere until the Earth becomes a silent, glowing marble suspended in the velvet dark of the void. From this height, the boundaries of eras dissolve. The crushing pressures of the Hadean, the emerald pulse of the Carboniferous, and the volcanic scars of the Great Dying are all etched into the same stone, a singular, breathing history that spans billions of years. The sensory experience of this final drift is one of absolute weightlessness. The frantic motion of the Anomalocaris and the heavy metallic rain of the iron seas have slowed into a glacial stillness. You are a witness to the dust of time, the realization that every mountain you have seen rise will eventually be ground into the silt of a future seabed, and every titan that ruled the deep will become a ghost in the strata of the earth. The rhythm of the planet is not a linear march toward progress, but a circular dance of creation and destruction, a constant recycling of carbon and stardust. In the vastness of this deep time perspective, the human era is a mere flicker, a single, quiet breath in the middle of a global symphony that has played for eons. You feel the profound insignificance of the present moment, not as a source of fear, but as a source of peace. The burdens of a single life are weightless when measured against the cooling of a crust or the assembly of a supercontinent. You are part of a lineage that survived the fire of the Siberian traps and the ice of the snowball Earth. The very atoms in your body have been forged in stars and filtered through the gills of creatures that saw the first light of the Cambrian. The philosophy of the drift is the philosophy of surrender. To understand deep time is to let go of the need for permanence. The Earth is a vessel of constant transformation, a place where the end of one world is always the messy, beautiful beginning of the next. The silence of the ancient deep is not an empty silence. It is a full one, crowded with the memories of 1 trillion heartbeats and the potential for 1 trillion more. You are resting on the accumulated wisdom of 4 billion years of survival, a passenger on a rock that has mastered the art of beginning again. As the light of the sun catches the edge of the world, illuminating the thin, fragile blue of the atmosphere, you feel the pull of the great sleep. The stories of the Dunkleosteus and the Tiktaalik fade into a rhythmic hum, a tectonic lullaby that resonates in the marrow of your bones. The pressure of the deep is gone, replaced by the soft, dark embrace of the vacuum. The Earth continues its slow, majestic rotation, a spinning archive of secrets waiting for the next era to unfold. The dust settles, the fires cool, the oceans drift into a quiet, rhythmic pulse. You are a fragment of the universe experiencing itself, a witness to the secrets of the ancient deep, finally finding rest in the vast, unblinking eyes of time. The journey is complete. The world is at peace. Sleep now in the shadow of the giants, and let the dust of time carry you into the dreaming dark.